It's 1845. You're standing on the banks of the U.S River in southern Texas. This land is claimed by both the Republic of Texas and Mexico. Fast forward just 3 years, the border has suddenly shifted 150 miles south to the Rio Grande. An area larger than Florida is now part of the United States. But how? And why did a river become the dividing line between two nations? It all started in the 19th century. It was 1821 and Mexico had just won its independence from Spain. At this point, Mexico's territory stretched far north, reaching all the way up to present-day Oregon. But this vast expanse of land wouldn't remain under Mexican control for long. Fast forward to 1836, and we see the first major shift in the landscape. Texas, then part of Mexico, declares its independence after a series of conflicts with the Mexican government. The Lone Star Republic was born, but its southern border is far from settled. Texas claimed the Rio Grande as its southern boundary, while Mexico insisted it should be the Nueces River, about 150 miles further north. This disagreement simmered for nearly a decade, but things came to a head in 1845 when the United States annexed Texas. Now, what was once a local dispute between Texas and Mexico has become an international issue between two nations. James K. Polk, the 11th President of the United States, was a firm believer in what Americans called manifest destiny, the idea that the U.S. was destined to expand across the North American continent. With his eyes set on California and the Southwest, Polk saw an opportunity in the border dispute with Mexico. In 1846, Polk sent troops into the contested zone between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande. It was a provocative move, and Mexico took the bait. On April 25, 1846, Mexican cavalry attacked a U.S. patrol in the disputed territory, killing or wounding 16 American soldiers. Polk had the pretext he needed, and war was declared. The Mexican-American War that followed was a turning point in the history of both nations. For 2 years, American forces pushed deep into Mexican territory, eventually capturing Mexico City itself in September 1847. The war had devastating consequences for Mexico and marked the beginning of a significant expansion of U.S. territory. The conflict officially ended on February 2, 1848, with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. This agreement redrew the map of North America. Mexico had to give up over half of its land to the United States, which included what are now California, Nevada, Utah, most of Arizona, and New Mexico, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. But for our story, the most significant aspect of the treaty was its definition of the new border between the two countries. The treaty stated that the boundary would follow the Rio Grande from its mouth on the Gulf of Mexico to the point where it struck the southern boundary of New Mexico. From there, it would run west to the Pacific Ocean. Why the Rio Grande? Well, it wasn't just about picking a convenient natural landmark. The river had long been seen as a significant geographical feature in the region. It provided water in an often arid landscape and had been used for centuries by indigenous peoples, Spanish colonizers, and later Mexican and American settlers. For the United States, securing the Rio Grande as the border was a major victory. It gave them control over a vital waterway and pushed the border much farther south than the Nueces River that Mexico had previously claimed. It also provided a clear, visible boundary in an era before modern surveying techniques. But the story doesn't end there. In 1853, just 5 years after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the border shifted again with the Gadsden Purchase. The U.S. bought an additional 30,000 square miles of land from Mexico for $10 million, primarily to secure a route for a southern transcontinental railroad. This purchase gave the U.S.-Mexico border its current shape, with the Rio Grande defining its eastern portion. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so they drew a line on a map. Job done, right? Well, not quite. Defining a border on paper is one thing, but marking it on the ground is a whole different ballgame, especially when that border runs through some of the most challenging terrains in North America. In 1849, the United States and Mexico formed the Joint United States and Mexican Boundary Commission. Their task was to survey and mark the new international boundary. The survey teams faced incredible hardships. They battled scorching desert heat, freezing mountain cold, and a constant lack of water and supplies. The maps they had were often inaccurate, and they frequently found themselves lost in the vast, uncharted wilderness. However, perhaps their biggest challenge was the Rio Grande itself. You see, rivers aren't known for staying put. They have a habit of changing course over time, especially in flood-prone areas. This posed a unique problem. What happens to the border when the river moves? This question led to numerous disputes over the years. Land that was once in Mexico would suddenly find itself on the U.S. side of the river, and vice versa. These areas, known as bancos, became a constant source of diplomatic headaches. The ever-changing nature of the Rio Grande has led to some truly peculiar situations along the U.S. Mexico border, highlighting the challenges of using a river as an international boundary. One of the most notable examples is the Camazal dispute, a century-long disagreement that showcased the complexities of a shifting riverine border. This dispute centered around a parcel of land near El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. Over time, the Rio Grande had gradually moved southward due to natural erosion and flooding, effectively transferring what was originally Mexican territory to the U.S. side of the river. This seemingly simple geographical shift sparked a diplomatic controversy that lasted for over 100 years. Both nations claimed sovereignty over the land, leading to tensions and highlighting the need for a more flexible approach to border demarcation. The dispute wasn't fully resolved until 1963, when President John F. Kennedy and Mexican President Adolfo López Mateos agreed to a compromise. They decided to divide the contested area between the two countries and, in an unprecedented move, agreed to physically reroute the river to create a more stable boundary. Another intriguing example of the Rio Grande's border quirks is the case of Horseshoe Bend, near Rio Rico, Texas. Here, a sharp meander in the river created a situation where American citizens would have to cross through Mexican territory to travel between 2 points in Texas. This geographical oddity posed practical problems for local residents and border enforcement alike. Recognizing the impracticality of this arrangement, the U.S. and Mexico came to an agreement in 1906 to straighten this section of the river. However, the wheels of international diplomacy often turn slowly, and it wasn't until 1977 that the United States officially acquired the land, finally resolving this border anomaly. Perhaps one of the most unusual incidents along the Rio Grande border occurred in 1911, showcasing how even wildlife can inadvertently impact international borders. Near Hidalgo, Texas, a group of industrious beavers constructed a dam that diverted part of the Rio Grande's flow. This briefly turned approximately 25 acres of Texas into Mexican territory, which was eventually resolved. To address this issue, the two countries established the International Boundary and Water Commission in 1889. This body was tasked with managing water rights along the border and resolving disputes caused by the river's shifting course. The fact that this commission is still active today, more than 130 years later, is a testament to the complexity of using a river as an international border. However, the challenges of the Rio Grande border go beyond just shifting riverbanks. The river itself has faced increasing pressure over the years. As populations on both sides of the border have grown, so too has the demand for water. Speaking of bizarre borders, have you ever wondered about the line that separates the United States from its northern neighbor, Canada? It stretches over 5,500 miles, making it the longest international border in the world. But behind this border lies a bizarre history. Curious? So why not check out our video about the US and Canada border?